start. Great. Well, thank you for joining us. I know that we have a number of folks that are trying to dial in, and we'll get them plugged in, but we also are recording this to share with others who were not able to join us at this time. But I am Richard Seeline. I'm the co-founder of Resilience Innovation Hub and a partner with Robin Barsky and Ira Ziff in our efforts for what we call on-demand talent regarding resilience and resilience-related companies, which you'll hear a little bit more about their work in our topic. But I wanted to take a moment and share with those who are not familiar with the Resilience Innovation Hub. We focus our attention on pre-disaster and risk mitigated resilience, where we are seeking to unleash innovative risk mitigation as defined here on this very unique matrix. It's a column, don't look across, but it's column. These are the disasters and risk profile, from drought to disrupted supply chains, from automotive to public-private partnerships. You can see faster than I can where are areas that align with the important steps of the insurance and reinsurance sector, or what we call insurance as economic capital. This profile of incidents, disasters, market focus, stages of where these technology equipment and data science tools can fit into reducing future risk, and most importantly, ensure that communities and businesses stay operational during anything from a drought, flood, snowstorm, fire, earthquake. So in our efforts to do this, we've identified over 40 different companies that fit into a portfolio that we have built out with the Innovation Hub and our networks across the country, our collaboratory network, from Boston, New York, Chicago, Norfolk, Virginia, San Juan, Puerto Rico, New Orleans, and soon to be in Florida, California, Oregon, and also in discussions with the Dutch and the Danish in Europe. But our pipeline of these portfolio companies and investors includes public and private partners, as well as the think tanks of the Insurance Information Institute and the Reinsurance Association of America. So we are, through the Innovation Hub, seeking to connect technology, equipment, and data science to insurers, reinsurers, and alternative financing, private equity, public finance, and grants and contracts from public procurement. So our agenda is pretty robust, and this is part of our agenda today, is to identify the different gaps that exist now in future-proofing the United States. We go from resilience data exchange, which is a new national initiative with academic, federal, state agencies, the insurance and reinsurance community, to find better ways to look at modeling, whether it's hydrological modeling, economic financial risk, nature-based, and even social impact, low to moderate income neighborhoods. We have launched the Resilient Citizens Corp initiative as a first in the nation pilot project with Houston Community College to train up 500,000 Houstonians to be resilient. We continue to have our Resilience Investing Forum, which we'll talk about at the end of this session today. We further look to connect founders of color and diversity with communities of color and diversity to make sure that they have access to innovation, resources, and tools, especially in underserved populations. And last, but definitely not least, is the opportunity to connect all of this, including companies that you all represent, to the talent that's needed to grow companies, and to tie that talent search to insurance, reinsurance, and again, alternative financing, alternative sources of human capital from whether it's industry, federal agencies. This case, what we're focused on is our partnership with Robin and Ira. So I'm going to let them do a little bit of introduction themselves while we're setting up the presentation, but I am so pumped that both of them have joined us today to engage in a workshop of how to identify and optimize your human capital for the growth of your company, and frankly, some unique tips that Ira and Robin have identified on how to engage that talent in actually exploring a partnership and a relationship with your company to help it grow. So, Robin, if you'll give me a second, I'm going to open up for you and Ira to go ahead and begin to introduce yourselves, and I will then pull up your presentation so that we can get going. But Robin, the stage is yours, and just let me know how you want me to advance.
Thank you, Richard. So thank you for having us here today. And basically just want to reinforce the partnership that we have with Richard and his constituents to help this network to find great talent that can help propel your businesses. That's really what we're all about. We're a recruiting firm called the Insurance Recruiter, which is a division of the Precision Research Group. Ira founded that organization over 2 decades ago, and I'll talk a little bit about what we do. But Richard, if you can, and then Ira, you'll get on a little bit later, but I'm just going to run through a variety of guidelines that can help you to be more thoughtful and strategic in the process of acquiring talent. And, you know, needless to say, every hire can materially affect the trajectory of any business, particularly a startup. So we want to empower you to shorten the distance between finding exceptional talent right away, as fast as possible, to help actualize your goals so that you can, of course, ultimately gain competitive advantage. So just a little bit of a background on the firm. We've been doing executive search for, Fortune 50 to startups, and we're really well known for our very high placement and candidate alignment rates. We've achieved a 97% retention rate, with placements lasting up to 6 years and over. Over 50% of our placements have been women. Over 31% of our placements have been diversity. And today I'm just going to share with you some of these recruiter secrets and tactics that we use to achieve these results so that you too can optimize your investment in human capital. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a 3-point plan that's going to cover job descriptions, marketing strategies, candidate screening and vetting. And then lastly, I'm going to give you a framework to ask more impactful and compelling questions when you're screening the candidates. And then lastly, we'll turn it back over to Richard and Ira, who are going to do a Q&A for you. So Richard, if you don't mind to bring up my PowerPoint, we're going to jump right in.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Huh. Okay. Let me make sure. Okay. Let me go back and there we go. Sorry, it just kind of.
So just hop up one more slide for, before this one. There you go. Okay, great. So here's a quick overview of the 3-point plan, and I'm going to go into them in more depth. So first you have to define. If you don't have real clarity on what you're looking for, then it's really hard to find. If you want to recruit exceptional talent, you have to start with a very high definition job description and a set of interview questions that describe clear and measurable outcomes. A weak job description is like me asking my spouse to buy vegetables. And when he comes back with celery and carrots, I'm like looking at him extremely frustrated, and I'm thinking, he wasn't listening to me. This ambiguity is why so many searches take much longer than necessary, and how even the Harvard Business School in a study found that 80% of employee turnover is due to poor hiring decisions and unclear performance objectives. This is especially acute in startups. 2, find and attract. Most companies and contingency recruiters will use passive tactics to identify and recruit talent, especially today where online platforms make it so easy to just, post jobs and wait for people to apply. The truth is that the top performers you want are more than likely gainfully employed, and they're not necessarily raising their hand. So you have to uncover them strategically, and you have to market to them with compelling messages that is going to magnetize their interest. And then thirdly, align. If you've done 1 and 2 properly, then you'll be well positioned to not only align a candidate to a role, but also mutually determine whether or not that candidate is the right move for you and for them. Next slide, please. So what we noticed many years ago is an almost universal reliance on generic job descriptions, and it continues to this day. The average job description is too focused on what a desired employee does and how they do it, and it's filled with generic attributes like team player and communicator and creative and entrepreneurial. And most resumes are also filled with these kinds of generic terms and attributes. So it's very, very hard to differentiate between candidates. These parallel forces often lead to suboptimal hires. So it's no wonder that eventually management becomes really frustrated by low rates of engagement, productivity, and retention. Next slide, please. This is how we've changed the conversation to facilitate smarter placements for our clients. It comes down to making the job description so enticing that you do nothing but magnetize a prospect's interest. First, the company overview has to be as compelling as your pitch is to your investors. 2, the job responsibility shouldn't just be like functions like they're generic ingredients on a candy bar wrapper. They have to be reframed into key outcomes and KPIs that will not only enrich your business, but also advance their career. 3, as I mentioned earlier, soft skills are usually listed as generic attributes like collaborative team player, good communicator. You've heard these words ad nauseum. Now, these skills are absolutely important, but if you just use them alone, they can imply just so many things. So take, for example, communications. It could mean empowering team members. It could mean building consensus. It could be engaging a customer. It could be promoting a brand. There's all different ways that you could spin communications. And so what's really important is the value that you want those soft skills or those attributes to contribute to your business. So unless you really define it very specifically, you're going to end up with the wrong type of communicator, for example. So let's get into a couple of examples. Next slide, please. What if your job description could talk? Would it raise the eyebrows of a passive candidate that's happily engaged in their current role? As I said, the company overview has to be as compelling to a candidate as it would be to an investor. You have to get them at hello. So when developing the overview, you should be answering these questions. What's so compelling about your business? What's so enticing about your culture and your leadership? And thirdly, what will be the ROI on their career? In other words, how will this role make a difference in advancing his or her career? Because you know what? They're really subconsciously thinking about this, and they're thinking, what's in it for me? Next slide, please. Okay, here's a real example of a startup we worked with, and this is the job description, the beginning of the job description that they sent to us before we started to work with them. And I'm going to read you because it's very important. I need to show you some things. Company is seeking a seasoned VP of sales to join our growing team. The VP sales will be responsible for acquiring and retaining customers for our language intelligence platform, creating a comprehensive go-to-market strategy to help develop the market for the new service and identify early adopters to work with who can help influence the direction, feature set, and pricing of the product. If you have a passion for learning and want to join a rapidly scaling company, then this is the perfect opportunity for you. Now, most of this is pretty generic. See what I've highlighted: acquiring and retaining customers, creating a go-to-market strategy, identifying early adopters. Well, duh, that's what salespeople do. The opening here is very precious real estate. And all of this is relatively weak to entice and capture the interest of a high producer. So I want to show you what we did as a first pass to make it more compelling. Next slide, please. This is a rare and exciting opportunity to accelerate the growth of our rapidly scaling AI-powered language intelligence platform. With a runway to build a high-performing sales team and chart a go-to-market plan, the ideal candidate will have previously led a sales initiative that generated 10 million ARR and ultimately 100 million with an enterprise SaaS platform or software infrastructure products. Now, this gets into the what's in it for me issue, because if I'm in sales, I'm thinking about how this opportunity is going to impact my earning potential. Next paragraph. While other companies offer generic solutions, company is positioned to be an indispensable tool in the insurance, life sciences, and other STEM industries. Our technology dramatically reduces operational costs, improves customer service, and brings unprecedented organization to highly sophisticated enterprises. So this lays out the business proposition for the company so the candidate can envision the market potential and the competitive edge that they can achieve by selling the product. This really speaks to the candidate, what's in it for them, what the potential is, and it's really magnetizing them to think like, wow, this is something I could really be interested in. Next, please, Richard. Okay, on the next section of the job responsibilities, our technique is to create a high definition, nuanced image of the ideal candidate based on behavioral competencies, desired skills, and KPIs. We want you to think really critically about what you want your candidate to do to help you actualize your business. In other words, the value that they're going to deliver. So we created this value map. And what it does is it breaks down how top performing employees contribute value. They're either increasing, saving, changing, or mitigating, and in many cases, a combination of them. The subcategories in the boxes highlight the major ways that value translates into impact on a company, a client, a community, any stakeholder you can think of. And this is what we use as a starting point to help our clients think about what they want their ideal candidate to deliver. And we ask them a very important question right up front. And we say, you know what? If you were writing a year-end review for this role, tell me in what 3 ways will they have exceeded your expectations? Would you be surprised that most people, even in the C-suite, have difficulty pinpointing even just 3 of these outcomes? But we use this map to help guide them through the process, right? So increase is built around sales a lot, profitability, productivity, increasing your brand. Saving is all about, of course, saving money, overhead, whether it's operating costs or even the cost of a lost customer. Mitigating is actually very, very overlooked, but it's all about reducing various financial, operational, and reputational risks. And change is about transformation, whether it's systems or people, which can have a real significant impact on the trajectory of a business. Now, we know you're already thinking in these terms as you run your day-to-day business. The key is to translate them into outcomes that are tied to the employee's performance and then communicate them in your recruiting process. In fact, the double benefit here is that these value indicators not only help you to gain clarity on the outcomes you want for that employee's performance, but they also help you to create a standardized list of interviewing questions. And that makes it better all around for everybody. And in the end, you're going to make better hires and you're going to have greater confidence knowing that you have the right person on your team who's helping you solve the challenges that might be keeping you up at night. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let's go back to our VP of sales. Now, this is the responsibilities that they gave us. What do you see here? 9 bullet points. I'm not even going to read them. You know why? Because it's most likely that no one else is going to read them either. It's just too much. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we minimize them to make them much more compelling. Okay, next slide. All right. So the same is true for requirements and qualifications, right? So these days, you know, it's likely that that someone is going to be reading this job description on their phone, right? So you really have to get them at hello, like I said before. And if you want to put like the whole story of your company and you know the millions of responsibilities and qualifications you want, fine, but like leave that up on the website. If somebody's really motivated, they'll go there and they'll read the whole story. But if you want them to swipe right on your job description, then you have to make it really, really concise and compelling. So in our conversation with the founder of this company, we realized that it became apparent that a few critical needs had to be stated up front. So first, they had this VP of sales had to be a player coach. They had to be on the front line selling and eventually build and manage a team of elite enterprise sales professionals. And this gets to that, you know, on the value map, this gets to increasing sales and market share. Evangelize. They had to, evangelize an unknown enterprise solution to gain rapid access to coveted decision makers and cultivate early adopters. Now, you know, since this is a startup, we dedicated this bullet to evangelizing because it's important if you're a player coach, but you've worked for like a very large, you know, Fortune 50 firm, you know, it's likely that they may not have a reference, this potential candidate, for promoting an unknown company. So you really want to make sure if you want somebody who's nimble enough to be working with an unknown brand and to create a market position and grab market share, they have to be able to be experienced in really selling something that's fairly unknown. And then 3 and 4, you know, working relationships with the key decision makers, et cetera, in Fortune 500 firms. And of course, industry expertise. This is what they wanted, you know, large enterprise sales management experience with AI or NLP solutions. So these last 2 bullets, 3 and 4, really speak to coming to the table with a network of relationships. And, you know, unless the candidate in their case, and I think in many cases, unless the candidate is like plug and play, you're not going to have the patience to wait around to for this person to come up to speed. So next slide, please.
Robin, I'm going to take advantage of something. I just want it because it's so visual of here's what it looked like before. And here's a very, like you said, streamlined approach. I think that's compelling for anybody who is trying to grow their company.
Right.
So I just had to point that out.
Exactly right. So what we remember, they had 17 responsibilities listed over there when they first started this process. And we distilled it down to the 4 most critical requirements necessary. And that's how you're going to ensure a better pool of candidates. When you can bring it down to the real critical things, it's going to eliminate those folks who are just not properly aligned. Now, with your compelling job description, the challenge then, of course, becomes finding the talent pool. And, as I said earlier, many companies and startups, even large companies, rely on a post and pray strategy, and they just wait. And they just wait for people to apply, and they use a lot of passive techniques such as LinkedIn, asking their friends and their colleagues in their professional networks for referrals. And mostly, they put ads on job boards, and then they wait. And, when a company receives like hundreds and sometimes even thousands of resumes, they tend to have a false sense of security. But the problem is that in most cases, there's no guarantee that all those resumes that you get are going to represent the best available talent. Remember, top performers may not be raising their hand because they're either not compelled by those weak messages, or they don't want to put themselves out into the market because they need to protect their status, with their position with their companies. So it's much better if you find them than them finding you. And also, as searches mature, it's common to be left with like a whole slate of underwhelming candidates. And when recruiters know that they're working against other recruiters, they almost always take the path of least resistance. In other words, they're going to invest limited resources because they got to move on to their next search. And they don't really want to spend a lot of time. So they're just going to go digging into their own databases, and whoever's there is there, and they're not really going to put much effort into it. So, and unfortunately, all of these things compounded together have an effect of overexposing the message, which can really turn off a lot of candidates, because the message then becomes very confusing in the marketplace because you don't really know what's up. Next slide, please. So we take a very strategic approach to sourcing candidates. It's like launching a heat-seeking missile. The missile needs to be aimed at the right target with the right message. So first, what we do is we conduct a very wide-ranging environmental scan of the market. We develop a customized, targeted talent pool, and then we use very sophisticated search techniques and technology to build the list. And then we distill it down to, who might be much more aligned potentially with the role. And then we hit them a lot, and we execute a multi-touch outreach campaign. It's usually 5 to 6 to 8 touches by email, lots of phone calls, lots of LinkedIn messages, because the truth is that it could take that many touches for someone to respond to you. And our motto in this is persistence beats resistance. Hiring these strong candidates, the top performers that are out there, it's very expensive, and we just can't afford to make mistakes, right? So if you have a clear image of the ideal candidate that you're looking for through the value map and going through that real thoughtful process, and then you can target a very short list of prospective candidates that are out in the marketplace who potentially are aligned with your role, then you're really positioning yourself to make a very smart hiring decision. Next slide, please. And we're just nearing the end here. So alignment is all about properly calibrating and your candidates during the time when you're screening and vetting them. And this is, again, as I said earlier, where the value map comes into play, because we use it as a guideline to develop targeted questions that everyone can use in the process. The other thing that we do is we create a lot of questions out of this value map that aren't necessarily asked in the verbal interviews, but are asked in a document, in a screening tool that we use, that we send to our top list of candidates. We make them fill it out, and it really asks them to double click, if you will, on a lot of different skills and attributes and accomplishments and all the KPIs that our clients want, so they can really get some color commentary on what the value is that they bring to the table. And then that's what we use to then create the real short list of candidates that, you know, we would submit. So this whole value map and this whole defining the outcomes and the KPIs and the specific value that you want this employee to deliver is what gets us to the finish line much smarter and much quicker. So here's a couple of just questions. I'm going to give you a gift. We have thousands of these in our archives. And next slide, please. And I'm just going to give you some examples of some of the questions that you could be asking or thinking about when you're thinking about hiring key roles. So let's say you're thinking of someone, right, who needs to be in the increase category, right? So you can ask them, how have you created an upward spiral for revenue growth, or cemented coveted relationships, or poised enterprises to grow exponentially, so on and so forth. There's so many questions that you can ask in these areas. And well, again, you want to get into specifics that are meaningful for you. Next, please. Let's say you're in the mitigate risk category, and that's really important because everything we do also mitigates risks, particularly in the resilience business, right? So here's some questions. How have you fortified a company to overcome adverse market conditions? How have you detected and solved problems that might otherwise gridlock some initiative, right? How have you developed strategies for customer retention, renewal? How have you given stakeholders, a line of sight into potential risks? These are all really important because it's getting at the candidate's skills in terms of what is important for them to deliver for you. And then lastly, next slide, please. I just want to touch upon these soft skills because, these are the generic terms that everybody uses, and they really don't mean anything until you define them. So as I said, we've got like thousands of these, and I just want to give you some examples. So if you're looking for someone with resilience, no pun intended, you can ask them, how have they turned setbacks into comebacks? If you want someone who's reliable, how they've cemented confidence in a company or the products, opportunistic, how have they found hidden value in mature markets? Strategic, team player. Here goes the team player. We've heard that a million times. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, here's an example. How have you built alliances by working collaboratively to reach the optimum solution? And finally, our all-time favorite, communicator. How have you influenced others to change their vantage point? And that's, of course, very critical in sales. It's very critical in senior leadership decision-making. But there's a whole different side of communications when you're dealing with brand and marketing and other decision-making. So you really have to define specifically what type of attribute you want and how that attribute manifests itself in the workplace, in the job, to deliver a specific outcome. So in closing, I want to encourage you to resist the temptation of cutting and pasting, generic job descriptions that are out there. We would love for you to, have a copy of our value map. We're happy to send it to you, or if you want the entire deck, you can contact Ira. And certainly if we could be of any help to you in this regard. But, as I said before, it's just really critical to, particularly for early hires, it's so critical to think strategically about what you want. Take the extra time. Don't just find something out there online or from a competitor or a colleague and think it's going to get you the candidates you want. You really just need to take the time to think about the value. If you remember anything today from what I'm saying, it's all about value. It's all about what you want that candidate to deliver for you, that then is the value creator for your business. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, your attention. I'm going to turn it back over to Richard, who's going to lead Q&A with Ira. And I'm going to hop off in a minute because I have another commitment. Is there any, Richard, do you want to ask me anything?
Well, I'm going to take advantage because I know that Ira and I are going to do the next stage of this, but I do want to reemphasize this. I think what I am walking away with several pieces of kind of shifting my thinking about talent development and talent recruitment. Because one thing, Robin, that we're all told is come up with all the right words so the bots will drive the opportunity for sorting who you're looking for. And that, yes, there's a lot of words here, but the value map is an exercise that if you as a founder, you as a company partnered with investors, this is really saying spend a little bit of time up front. Don't just come up with a bunch of magic words, because all that's going to do is check mark what the bots will send you rather than being more strategic. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. That's absolutely spot on, Richard. And remember too, is that, the bots are really depending on where you are posting your job. I mean, if you're just going to post your job online and then wait for people to respond to you, then yes, the bots are kind of important. But if you're going to, that's taking a reactive position. But we're hoping that everyone in this group is going to take a proactive position. And that means that you want to go after the people that you want. So the bots really don't matter, because you want to pinpoint and target the people that have the skills and the value that you want. So it doesn't matter what keywords they have on their resume, right? There's certain things, if you can define clearly what you're looking for, a great recruiter will be able to find those people for you. So you have to take the proactive position to really find what you want. Otherwise, you're going to be extremely frustrated with the bots.
Yep. And I think that's a perfect segue, Ira, if you'll unmute so that we can delve into deeper some of the pieces that Robin raised. And Robin, I know that you may have to drop off, but jump in if you can. Ira, thank you for your counsel and guidance on establishing this collaboration and partnership. Let me throw a couple of questions to you. Let's have a little bit of a dialogue, because these are questions that also have been kind of triggered by what Robin just said. All right. I just heard last night driving that LinkedIn now says we are seeing the most significant job transition, job shifting we've ever seen in the history of this country. People are leaving, going to something else. There's a lot of kind of reckoning, post-COVID. Why is it so hard to get the attention of these top performers?
Well, I was just at, well, first of all, thanks for having us, Richard. I literally just got back from ITC in Las Vegas for the big conference in InsurTech. And everyone's screaming for talent. There was no exhibitor, no one that I met there that wasn't looking for their next salesperson or the next data person, et cetera. And they were just a fish out of water. Nothing's working for them. And unless you really adopt what Robin, the best practices that Robin reviewed, you simply have no chance. Some of these people are getting calls on the hour. There's a war for talent that I haven't seen as intense over the last 23 years that I've been doing this. I've been through a couple of really big upturns, but nothing like this. So, it's all about being able to get the attention of people who would otherwise just not be interested.
Right.
And that's really
part of it, Ira. Part of it is really rising above a lot of the noise. Is that a part of that as well?
It's crystallizing the right message to tap into the interest, because most people are giving generic messages. So if you can really capture their imagination or their intention. So for example, a lot of our job descriptions start with, imagine doing something. Imagine being part of an exciting whatever. Imagine is a great word that's used in advertising. Why shouldn't we use it in recruiting?
All right. So now let me go one step deeper. All right. We are focused in this conversation, but also, as you know, in the Innovation Hub, in the network across the country, on insurance and reinsurance companies. All right. So why is it so hard for us to, pull out of, those carriers some of these top employees?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that, because just the insurance business alone, people are in the risk aversion business, right? And so they also treat their careers that way, which is very interesting.
Huh.
But there's two ways to look at it. On one hand, it's a really good situation for people who are mid or late career people or professionals who are just feeling undervalued, and they're just stuck in a rut. And they see the funding that's going on in the insurtech world, and they want a piece of it. They like a piece of the equity, they like some of the excitement. So if they can free themselves and take that risk, they're likely candidates. They're hard to find, so you have to kiss a lot of frogs, if you will. On the other hand, it's very difficult, because a lot of these people have stock options that are too expensive to fund or to replace, or they're simply just, stuck in their rut, and they're just not going to make a move. So that's why, like what Robin said, you have to do an environmental scan. You've got to really hit these people with the right messages, and eventually you'll find the right person, but it takes a lot of work.
Can I go one part deeper on that as well? All right. Not a lot of folks, especially on the technology, the entrepreneurial, or even on the kind of the investing side, really understand the insurance reinsurance sector. So am I sensing that not only do the messages have to be much more targeted based on what Robin just shared, but it's also being somewhat fluid in the language and the organizational structure to really understand where you should target. All right.
Of course, yeah.
So that means, frankly, and I think that's one reason why we sought you out for this collaboration is you can go get a lot of recruiters. You can do a lot of, spread everything across lots of different recruiters, but so why not do that? Why not just spread as much of the peanut butter, so to speak, across lots of recruiters? Or, and maybe I'm building your case for you, putting, your eggs, putting it into a basket, so to speak, or partnering with somebody who really understands this industry.
Yeah. Well, look, most often the calls that I get are from executives who are completely frustrated, having, used 2, 3, 4, 5 recruiters. So, you would think it would be more logical to, like you said, spread it around and tap into everyone's network. But the truth is that, well, first of all, you have to understand there's a difference between contingency searches and retained searches. Contingent searches are where the recruiter is paid at the end of the search. A retained search typically involves paying a small retainer up front and getting paid at the end of the search.
Right.
So a contingency recruiter only places, these are national averages, 20% of their open positions. Though they know they have an 80% chance of not filling this role. So why in the world would they put a lot of time into it? So they're going to skim the top, and they're not going to do not that much more than any other recruiter or even an in-house recruiter. So the difference between finding, the difference is if you find a trusted retained search recruiter who will really do the right job and deliver you the right candidates, in the end, you're going to pay one way or the other. You might as well pay and get the right person. And in the end, it'll be a lot more cost effective.
As well as having individuals who understand the industry that we are targeting, which is the insurance and reinsurance, sector. All right. All right, I'm gonna go to something that you and I talked about before. A lot of these emerging and growth companies really need business development and salespeople. I mean, that's their probably first to hire scenario. All right. How should founders of these emerging and growth companies look at going after their first salesperson, their first business development person?
Well, I had this discussion over and over and over again at ITC with emerging companies who are looking for their first or second salesperson, or now one of the executives is transitioning out of sales and they need a dedicated person. So one of the things that I told all of them is that you have to think about whether you need a player or a player coach. And I think Robin alluded to it in her presentation. So a player is someone who's just a straight salesperson. A player coach is someone who is a salesperson who can then emerge into a manager. And it's more likely that this person will always continue to be selling, at least for the near future. But it's two different headsets. A player coach is much harder to find because normally someone is either a player or a coach, but it could be a fatal flaw not hiring that person for that role, depending upon the company's needs and their growth trajectory. So another key ingredient is what Robin talked about, is being able to evangelize a new company, because most salespeople aren't very good at that. So once again, you have to find out what the client needs and align their needs to the applicants.
You're raising so many great points. Let me talk with you about part of what you just described. It sounds like if I was going to hire my first salesperson, I really want somebody who is a player coach, who basically is prepared to do business development and sales, but is also prepared to grow that team, that sales and business development team. Is that what I'm sensing? If you had your kind of druthers for a growth stage company, it would be, look, don't just go hire a salesperson. Think about that person being the individual that's going to build out your business development strategy and team. Is that what you're?
Well, yeah, I mean, that could be the ideal scenario, but the market reality may not allow it to happen. I mean, we may not be able to find that perfect person. So you know, you could rank your needs, and all we can do is deliver the very best available talent, and hopefully we're getting just the right person for that. That might have to wait for the second hire.
Okay, so then let me go to the other side of the coin, and that is about the evangelizing, right? And remember, I'm a novice at this, so I may ask a stupid question here, but I'm trying to think about being an owner of a technology company or a product company in this space, all right? If I'm going to get an evangelist, I'm hoping that that evangelist is somebody that is comfortable with what our product is.
Right.
Right. Or is comfortable in being able to turn back around to the insurance or reinsurance or whoever is that market that we're targeting. That sounds real obvious, right? But that may not be the case. So is it somewhat, Ira, that you're going to hire a great sales business development person, but they're really going to have to spend a little time understanding the technology, the product? Or is it, boy, I've got somebody who really understands our product and understands, who our end users are, but may need to take a little bit more time developing the sales strategy? I mean,
yeah, it's all of that. But really, what it comes down to, you need to hire a believer. You need to hire someone who, not only understands the products and understands the application, but believes in it and lives it like it's a religion. And so that's why we call it an evangelist. And God help the competition when you're in this person's way. You need that kind of energy and enthusiasm to
so
really.
that's when you say, look, when you're going through the value pieces, you're really beginning to rank. You could have an owner, founder, or set of owners and founders who are really great evangelists. I mean, they really know how to talk the product, right? But sometimes they're not great at sales. So this is really also taking a look at, as an owner, co-owner, or the investor owner, or whatever, is to really, they need to also say, this is what I'm not good at, and I am really looking for somebody in that value ranking. Is that part of what you want folks to take away?
Sure. And it's a very good point. Very often, the people running the company aren't the great salespeople, or sometimes they're the absolute greatest salesperson and they need other people to fill in around them. So every client is different and everyone has nuances that need to be addressed. And so it's not a cookie cutter approach.
So that then gets me into something also that you and I have talked about, and that is that you and the team being able to spend a little time with these companies, with the owners, the founders, even some of the investors, and really, really understand not just this one-off talent, scenario, but to really understand where their business is going. Because I think what I'm taking away is human capital, optimizing human capital, as Robin said early on, has as much influence for how your investors are sticking with you, knowing that you're going to grow this company, you're going to get a return on investment. So I think one of my additional takeaways is it's one thing to go hire the quarterback for me, but it's another one to kind of figure out, well, what's the whole team look like? What's the strategy? Am I saying that correctly?
Right. And not only that, it's one thing to hire someone, it's another thing to retain them. And the cost of losing an employee could be devastating to a startup. And
so then that gets me to, two other parts of the process and the strategy. Okay. Let's talk about compensation. All right. So in an emerging growth company, I can come up with a whole set of, compensation packages. I can give equity, I can give stock, I can, I mean, is that something that executive search or recruiter should be involved in? Is that frankly an advantage to have the recruiter play that role in helping negotiate the compensation package versus the founders, the owners, the current management team?
Oh my goodness, it's so essential because first of all, emotions get in the way. Both sides can play it really wrong. And that's why that's really one of the biggest reasons why these things fall apart. In terms of identifying what the package is, it's a dismal science when you're dealing with startups because there's no playbook that you can really rely upon. There's only generalities. So it's really, you need to depend upon your recruiter to find out really what the market will demand, and then see and just be sure that the company can meet those demands. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to hire these people. And it's really unrealistic. So before you even start, I need to be sure, if it's my client, that they're prepared to meet that market, whatever it is. And
Right.
it will find its way to some number toward the end of the search, but you have to be prepared for it. You cannot be unrealistic.
I'm thinking about, all of the entrepreneurs and founders I've worked with. The first hurdle is to overcome. This is my baby, Ira. I put all this sweat equity in. Okay. I mean, why am I going to give up compensation or more, or even frankly, if I've got a all-star or all stars, I'm going to go bring on board. I mean, you're telling me I may have to pay them more than what I'm being paid? Well, wait, so I agree with you. It is very emotional, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes not logical. But then the other part of it is that if you're going to go for, like we discussed early on, if you're going for a top performer and trying to, bring them out of one of the insurance, reinsurance carriers, right? There may be things that are triggers that you as an owner or founder may not realize what that trigger is. It could be something where I want to really build my own, I want to be a part of building something. I've been a part of a large corporate. So I think what you're saying is that you're not letting go of control of the final decision of the compensation package as an owner or investor in a growth company here. But what you really are doing is to the advantage of a third neutral party, such as you as a recruiter, who can step in and kind of buffer some of this emotion and some of the other. That seems to be critical, correct?
Yeah, and sometimes we're also working with the investors,
Right.
with the CEO. And normally the investors are the biggest advocate for finding the right people and taking the ambiguity out of the compensation package and understanding what the value is. So
there's another good point, and that is, as a growth company, not just to have the owner, founder making this decision, but frankly, to bring the investors to the table.
Yeah, not every investor is interested in this, but some of them feel very, if you will, invested in it. So it is a big part of what they're investing in, and they simply can't get it wrong, especially these early companies making their first few hires.
All right. So you mentioned earlier that compensation is one of the stumbling blocks or places where this whole recruiting process breaks down. What are a couple of other areas where?
Well, I would say that, just the candidate experience normally kills the process. You don't get back to them quickly, especially in a hot market. If you can't make a decision quickly, they're going to be off and running. Also, the biggest problem, I think, right now is what Robin talked about, is just not being clear on what you're looking for. So generic job descriptions yield generic candidates. So if your pool is the wrong pool, you know, you're not good to begin with. So
Yeah, if you're setting yourself up for failure.
Thank you. That's really what it is.
Yeah. You're setting up your company, you're setting up the process for failure. You know, and that's one of the things that, again, I think I've learned from our conversations is that get it right, or try to get it as close to right as you possibly can up front. Because I think what I've also learned from working with entrepreneurs and founders and growth companies is, oh, Richard, you know, we had a terrible experience with trying to find somebody, or we had a terrible experience with a recruiter. All right. I think what you and Robin are emphasizing is do the diligence up front, spend the time getting, you know, working with you and Robin and the team and vice versa. So that's one, get it right and come up with a process, which I think is what you've outlined here today. Okay. Where else does it break down?
Well, again, I think the other real key area is the candidate experience.
Right.
They're just not treated right. They're gaslighted. No one's communicating with them. No
Right.
one's following up, or the process is just too elongated, and they're continuously looking just for that right person. So,
Right.
my role is to first rapidly find 3 to 5 really great candidates, and then move this process along as fast as possible, because they're all going to slip away.
Right. So it means that the founders, the senior management of a growth company really need to be ready to move. That this isn't a fishing, if it's a fishing expedition, right? One, it's a waste of time and energy, but I think, you know, and I'm sure you've gone through this, where I after a while, it becomes basically a very, a terrible message. Well, that company's really on a fishing expedition. And that begins to have a reputation for the company's brand.
Well, I think just to wrap this up, I think it really comes down to one word, which is trust. There's got to be mutual trust between the recruiter and the hiring people. If the executive is constantly questioning and they're hiring the wrong recruiter, and that relationship isn't just right, it's just not going to work. It's equivalent to, putting your trust in any other service provider, whether it's a lawyer or an accountant or an architect. If you believe in that person, if you believe they can do it, follow them. If it doesn't feel right, it won't feel right, but you have to allow the process to work.
All right. There's a lot of emphasis on diversity now. All right. A lot of interest in this for the right reasons, but also a lot of interest because, frankly, it's opening some new markets that may not have been completely recognized. So, how do companies improve their diversity hiring and their diversity searches? What's your thinking on that?
Okay, so I've been doing this 23 years, and when I started out, I worked with companies, very, very large companies, finance companies in the Stanford area and the New York area. And if you look at these rooms that went on forever and ever, it was completely white faces. There weren't even vowels at the end of people's last names. It was whiter than white. And I was a big proponent of diversity in those days, and I was able to achieve things that they couldn't even imagine. So here's the secret sauce to finding great diversity talent. So the first thing is that you have to remember that they're a small percentage of the population. So let's say a certain class of people could be 16% of the population. Well, it may be even less in that role in that industry. So what's the statistical chance you're going to find that person using an ad or using other passive techniques? Well, you have to go and find them. You have to search high and wide for these people. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that many diversity candidates or people from foreign countries are allergic to bragging. They do a terrible job of presenting themselves both on paper, on a resume, and also in interviews, because they're culturally disoriented from bragging or promoting themselves.
Right.
So you could have a diamond in the rough, they could fall through the cracks. So you really have to spend the time and give them the opportunity and encourage them and lead the witness, if you will, to really bring out and like putting salt on a tomato, you have to bring out the flavor.
Right.
You don't change the taste, you bring it out. And that is the real skill of a great recruiter, whether it's in-house or outside. They have to be able to identify truly remarkable talent. But that's a technique that we should be using for all people.
Correct.
What we want to do is level the playing field so that people who are shy or diverse and not oriented to bragging will be able to compete and be able to be hired for great opportunities. So that's how I've been successful. You got to find them, and then you've got to be able to evaluate them.
Right. And help them tell their story, help them, feel comfortable. I refer to this sometime as, in certain places around the world, they call it the tall poppies. And that it's a terrible syndrome, because, the more I'm able to tell you what I've been able to do, they're scared that they're going to, like a poppy, be cut down. I think that what you're emphasizing is there is a lot of capability out there, and we need to be much more diligent about this. All right, this has been great. I want to ask one or two other quick questions before we drop off. When you sit down with a growth company, and from your experience, I kind of come back to one of the breakdowns or the hurdles. Richard, why should I spend money on a recruiter? I can go do this myself. All right. Well, we've discussed to some degree why that hasn't been that successful. All right. How are you able to provide that message, whether it's you or however you would describe, the role of a recruiter in executive search? But Richard, I can't afford, this, or I can go do it myself. What's been your response in those conversations?
Well, the bottom line is that not everybody is emotionally ready to do that. And again, it really comes down to building trust. And if they give you an opportunity to develop that relationship, and if I'm given the opportunity to really understand it and connect with them, there's a better chance that they'll be emotionally ready to make that investment. But sometimes people just have to go through it themselves, check their network, or use multiple recruiters. And then that's when they tend to come back to us.
Right. I think it's to me, in my experience, and also spending time with you and Robin, I think it's the value of the lost time and and revenue, so to speak. That if I'm out there and I get the wrong hire, now I've got a problem because now I've got to go back out and find somebody. My sense is that, and I think you're being humble about this, and that is that there really is. You're a coach. You play a role that's as much the search and the coach here, and time is money, and not getting the right hire is lost revenue and lost sales and reputation. So there's a lot of reason why, focusing on human capital as a critical part of the growth, understanding the insurance and reinsurance linkages and relationships. This has been great. I hope it's been beneficial for those who have listened in and those who will, listen to the recording. I am going to put back up on the screen, if I can, your contact information, but obviously they can also find you through, through our relationship. But I think it'd be important for folks who are listening in as we begin to wrap up. Here's your information for them to contact you. And I think one of the opportunities that we talked about is that as a result of the relationship with the Innovation Hub and with your team on this, talent on demand, that we'll work with them and do some one-on-one opportunities, and maybe even provide a little bit of a discount for folks who want to step in early. And so, Ira, thank you to you and Robin. Any quick concluding observations or comments?
Well, first of all, I really want to thank you, Richard, and I would welcome an opportunity to work with your community. We truly understand the challenges involved in helping emerging companies find the right talent and find success. And this is what fuels success, and it's the right time to start looking. There's an incredible feeding frenzy for talent. So the sooner you get on it, the better, because right now there's a small window between now and Thanksgiving, and then there's another small window just before the end of the year. And then once people get their bonuses and they're off and running, if you don't create the relationships now, it's very hard to start in the first quarter. So words are wise.
That's a great point. That's
if you're looking, start now.
Yep. Ira, thank you so much again. And thank you to Robin. And we'll follow up with all the folks that contacted us and wanted to participate in this. And we'll obviously share the recording out and look forward to our next workshop in December.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, sir.
All the best.
Thank you.